Welcome to You Sip, I Sip, a weekly podcast with Northern Lights Winery founder Doug Bell, exploring the experiences from leaders in business, social media, and family. Now here's this week's exceptional guest.
Welcome to You Sip, I Sip. I'm Doug Bell, the host of the podcast, and I'm very excited today we have Troy Bilodeau. Troy is the president of the Berezan Hospitality Group. He's a bit of a marketing guru, and I'm going to be very excited to hear more about that. He has 9 liquor stores under his portfolio across the province of BC and 2 Chances gaming centers. Not to mention, they also have Sasquatch Mountain Resort, and I know there's some exciting stuff coming up there, so I can't wait to hear about that. But maybe most importantly, you were born in Prince George, British Columbia, and your best friend is named Doug Bell. Unfortunately, I'm not him yet, but I'm hoping to become one of your friends in the future. And thank you so much, Troy, for joining us on the podcast.
Thanks, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'm having some of our Temptation sparkling canned 7% wine right now, which is one of our rhubarb strawberry products that we're really proud of. And Troy's got one of his products as well. What are you drinking?
I'm drinking a Simply Iced Tea lemon flavor, one of 3 flavors that we have, 5% alcohol.
Very cool. And those are so popular, especially during the summer months. So definitely you got to try that if you haven't had it yet. Now, Troy, you've got a very fascinating story, and it all began in Prince George. What can you tell me about your journey to becoming the president of the Berezan Hospitality Group?
Well, I've been in hospitality for well over 30 years now, on and off, but 30 years of experience. I guess it really started when I was about 13 years old. One of my best friends' dad owned a Mr. Mike's in Smithers, and that's where we moved to from Prince George, was to Smithers. So I started in the dish pit and prep cook and figured, hey, this is a lot of fun. And then shortly after that, I think about by the time I was 14, I was actually cooking at Mr. Mike's. So I moved right along quite fast. One of the things, though, that I'll never forget about that first experience was that Mr. Neve, the owner at the time, had told us that we had to eat all our mistakes. So we got really good at cooking because we got really full quick. So yeah, that was a fun thing. But I think from that experience to this day, when I go to one of our locations and I'm in the dish pit area, I thank that person for doing such a good job and working so hard, because it's not an easy job.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's so humbling when you get the opportunity to start from the ground up, right? I mean, it gives you a very different perspective of how you're going to appreciate both the people working for you and how all the different components of hospitality come together to provide that really cool experience.
Yeah.
So for yourself, did you immediately fall in love with that service industry?
I did, and it was just because I felt it was a fun, like there was always something going on. It was always different. Definitely a people person, and I just love to learn about people and their different cultures and their different ways. And I felt this industry was right up that alley. And if you're not a people person, then I don't think hospitality is the right industry for you. That's for sure.
Now, tell me what it was like living in the northern BC area. I mean, Prince George and Smithers are 2 iconic towns that if you're living in the southern half of the province, you probably don't know much about. But what did you experience in those towns?
Just everybody's so down to earth. And I just found living there, it was a great place to bring up a family. The skiing was phenomenal. I was a hockey player, so hockey was my life, and I think it was for a lot of people back then. And yeah, it was just a great place to be brought up in, that's for sure.
Well, that's great. So what happened next?
Well, then I went and tried a bunch of different industries. We actually then moved to Kamloops, BC, where I grew up in my teenage years, up until about 25 years ago, and got into the grocery business a little bit, and tried working in the oil patch for a bit. And that's when I really realized that the money was great, but I wasn't being fulfilled in just meeting people and stuff like that. So I ended up going back into the hospitality industry in the early 90s, and then ended up going and working for the Shark Club Bar and Grills, and was a store opener for them, and help open 5 locations, from running them to opening them up from scratch. Started there it's probably about 1989 in Grand Prairie, and opened up 2 locations in Grand Prairie, and then Langley, and then opened up a location in Burnaby for them.
That's great. So that kind of is really interesting, because you probably were doing this a very similar time to what my dad was actually doing over the years. In the mid '80s, he was opening up Wendy's Restaurants of Canada. At that time, there was this explosion of these chain restaurants, right? And it was very interesting to see people's tastes had developed and they had changed, and they were looking for consistency. The brands had more notoriety, but bringing that down to the people who were experiencing the services from these groups was very challenging as well, because there wasn't the systems and processes that there is today. Tell me a little bit about how you probably developed that in a time when it wasn't common.
Yeah, there was a lot to opening up a location. What I found is, I think after about the 3rd location I opened up from scratch, was that it took a little piece of my life every time I opened one up. A lot of hours, and a lot of time spent right from the ground up. So like, you're part of the design, to the hiring, to the training, to the opening, and then to the location running. So I find that the policies and the procedures of all that have changed over the years, for sure, and they're a lot more nailed down now than they were then. A lot of times, I think I look back to the first location that I opened up, a lot of it was just doing it from scratch, and just kind of doing the best you could day by day without anything nailed down, where towards the end of it, it was a pretty, the procedure was there, and it's the way, things were a lot more organized than they were at the beginning of it, for sure. But yeah, I think there was a time after I'd opened up my 3rd Shark Club where I'd had enough of doing that, just because it was so demanding on your time. And I was starting to lose the fun in it. And then it was shortly after that, when I was approached by Ronnie Patterson, who was formerly of Molson's for years and years and years, and told me about the Berezan group in the early 2000s. And I figured it was good timing, because I was kind of wanting to change, and it was definitely a challenge that I was up to. And I'll never forget, that's one of the first things I said to the owners of the Berezan group, was that I'd take on the challenge, but I do like to be challenged. And they've sure showed me that that challenge was always there, and it's never ending. And that's what I love about this company.
I think one thing you mentioned is that it was very challenging and demanding on your time. And I imagine, as a young guy, trying to establish yourself and set boundaries for your work-life balance, and what you do at home and what you do at work, that was probably a very interesting challenge. I know anyone who is listening who has opened up a business understands that it takes time. And certainly I remember spending thousands and thousands of hours, talking about like 70, 80 hours a week working at Northern Lights Winery when we're developing it. I mean, literally I was on a 20-foot Zoom boom, putting lumber into the ceiling to get it done on time, and blood, sweat, and tears is what you put into businesses. But then at the same time, I had my family life, and I really, wanted to make sure that I spent appropriate time with, with my future wife and doing things like that. How did you find that balance, and has the way that you've approached it evolved over time?
Oh, it totally has, and I can relate to, because during my early years of opening up shark clubs, I was a single father, and so I found, like, I was gone 13, 14, 15, maybe even longer hours a day, And my boy at the time was, 10, 11, 12 years old. So I would come home and I'd always call it the mystery of the day. You weren't too sure what to expect back at home. And there was a different mystery every day, but it was tough. I did it. And, I'm thankful for that experience because I brought it to where I am today. And I really do say that to this day, I think, having a great attitude, eating well, exercising, and having that balance, life-work balance is so important. And I think if you can do those things, you'll be a lot happier.
We all talk about work-life balance as this mystery goal, and everyone is trying to achieve it. But one of the things that I've always recognized is that there is no such thing as a perfect work-life balance, right? And I think a lot of people judge themselves based on their inability to achieve it in a moment rather than on their drive to achieve a better version of it over time. And so it's okay to say I'm going to dedicate 3 years to really building my career, and then maybe later on you say, actually, I'm going to dedicate 3 years to building my relationship with my family, and that can change. And you should never judge yourself for the decisions you made in the past, because it makes you who you are today. In a way, it really only improves you.
Yeah, and it's really easy to say, oh, have a good work-life balance, but to do that is another thing for sure.
Yeah, it definitely isn't easy. Now, I recognize that you're somebody who just loves hospitality. And specifically, the liquor industry kind of emerged as a career for you. So you mentioned your first introduction into the Berezan group was through a Molson's rep. But tell us a little bit more about like what kind of liquor means to you and why it gets you up every day and gets you excited.
Well, I've been passionate about it, obviously, for 30 plus years, to the point where I said one day that I should come up with my own liquor, something that could be branded and something that I'd be proud of to sell one day. And so between myself and a good friend of mine, we came up with a tequila brand called De La Tierra, which is a maple tequila. And that alone is its story in itself, because I think the most exciting thing I ever came about with that was that the one day where I walked into a liquor store in Victoria and I saw my brand on the shelf and went, oh, that's kind of cool. And you could probably relate with that, just that feeling in itself. And then I did an impromptu tasting at that location as well, because I thought it was pretty cool. But yeah, not just the brand that we came up with ourselves, but in our company, they've allowed us to kind of diversify, and we've come up with a lot of different either branded alcohol that we sell in our liquor stores or stuff that we've actually been huge in developing. I've also been aligned ourselves with Sauder School of Business, and we've had a lot of groups and focus groups help us develop products. So the Sauder School of Business at UBC, we took about a 10-person focus group, and they helped us develop Simply Iced Teas. Over a 3 or 4 month period, they did surveys in our liquor stores for what people were looking for, and different things like that. So, it's been definitely a very interesting journey on the liquor side, and it's something that I'm passionate about to this day.
That's really interesting. Maybe you can take us back to the story of building of your tequila brand. That sounds really interesting. What was the impetus for starting it, and what was that process like?
It's a funny story. One day, I think it was a Super Bowl, the morning of a Super Bowl, and we were driving down the road, and it kind of was just like something that hit me with tequila. And I wasn't even a big tequila drinker at that time, but I was just wondering if, it's one of those questions you ask yourself. I wonder if there's a maple tequila. So from that, it went into a lot of researching that topic, and then that whole thing, finding out if there was a maple tequila available anywhere in the world and what the name was and this and that. And after a lot of research, realizing there wasn't a product out there in the world with maple in it or anything like that. So then we went into I think the funnest part of this whole journey, which has now been over 12 years, was developing the product itself. So a lot of different types of tequila, a lot of different ingredients, a lot of different strengths, and then getting, friends and family to give you their background or their thoughts on the product itself, and which was probably a good couple of years just in the developing process of the actual product itself. And then from there, it went into the whole big process of looking up a distillery that would work with us in Mexico. There's a company, El Vejitos, who we ended up partnering with, who's, they've been around since 1937, which I believe is like 83 years or so now. So they've had a lot of experience with tequila, which was something we needed because we had no experience. And being a couple Canadians that wanted to come up with a maple tequila that kind of perked their interest in what that would taste like. From there, it's just been, a whirlwind and not easy. That's the one thing I'd have to say, is that if it was an easy process, I think a lot more people would do it. It's a very difficult process, and especially working into Mexico. It's hard enough coming up with a product just in British Columbia, but you have to go through a company called the IMPI in Mexico. You have to get licensed. We had to do a whole bunch of internal stuff with the Mexicans before we could even get going with the product. And then having product brought in, so we get maple brought in from Citadel in Quebec. That's a process. And then we get cinnamon brought in from Sri Lanka to Mexico. That's a process. So, it's not easy, but yet I would totally recommend anybody that is thinking about doing it to do it, just because it's so fulfilling at the end of the day.
Part of any alcohol brand is not just creation of the product, but then you got to sell it.
Right.
And you're a bit of a marketing guru, and this is probably maybe where you get a lot of your excitement from. Tell us about the process once it actually landed in British Columbia, what you had to do to get it onto shelves and then into consumers' mouths, because there's a very different place for selling into a liquor store versus selling out of a liquor store.
The biggest plus I had on my side with that is working for a company where I was involved with 9 liquor stores, which really helped it get to market right away without having to jump any hurdles or get anybody to help you with that. So that was a big plus for sure. You say, bringing it into BC, I gotta say one thing, and Doug, you'd know this for sure, is just how highly taxed alcohol is. It's just phenomenal. I think we're one of the highest taxed provinces in North America. I think we're sitting at about 165% right now, plus. And so it's not a cheap thing to bring it in. Like the product that we pay for and get developed in Mexico, by the time it hits the shelf in good old BC, the price is just phenomenal. And especially nowadays with things that were a lot cheaper 5 to 10 years ago. So, you look at glass, you look at the product itself, you look at shipping, all that stuff has just gone through the roof in the last even couple of years. So yeah, by the time you look at a $4 or $5 bottle in Mexico, you're looking at $50 to $60 by the time it hits the shelf. So it is an incredible thing to look at for sure.
And when you're building a brand, in a lot of ways, it's kind of an extension of yourself and your own personality. How did you interject your personality into, a Mexican Canadian tequila brand?
I think just that Canadian flair, where I've always really liked maple and maple syrup, and as a kid loved pouring it on my pancakes and what have you. So I think just being able to interject that into a recipe with alcohol was something, and it just fit. We just picked a really nice tasting reposado, so it was already a nice smooth tequila. And then we just added a touch of maple, and it's not a lot of maple. Like you get your first taste as kind of maple on the lip, and then your kind of aftertaste is a little bit of touch of cinnamon. So it's not like it's super sweet. But yeah, I think it was just the fact that I just wanted to throw that Canadian flair into something that that I thought might sell.
Other than this product, what other products have you been a part of the development process for over the years?
Well, like I'd mentioned, our iced tea coolers for sure. We do have two branded vodkas, but they're made from us out of a distillery in Alberta, and they just have the Berezan brand on them, which we sell in our liquor stores. We have two branded beers that we sell. One is a Sasquatch label, and that's sold up at Sasquatch Mountain Resort. And the other one is a Fear beer. And Fear beer has actually been in our portfolio, the Berezan liquor portfolio, for as long as I can remember, 20 plus years. And it's actually gone through a few different distilleries, but it's still a very popular beer. I believe we sell about 1,000 6-packs a week in our liquor stores. So it's popular, and it has its own little following for sure. We also have a branded rye, which is Rye on the Rocks. And that's something that we've rebranded about 3 to 4 years ago. And it goes to show you what's in a name and what's in a label. So it was doing its little sales, and we picked a name. Actually, we did a staff contest on naming a new name. And the winner of that name was Rye on the Rocks, and came up with a funky, a lot better appeasing label, and it's quadrupled its sales just because of that. And same liquid, everything else is the same in it, just a different name and a different look.
There's so much that goes into selling of a product, and when you're developing do you develop for the end consumer, or how do you kind of determine the factors that you're going to use in releasing a new flavor or a new product of some sort?
Well, it's definitely the liquid, and then the taste is for sure. If you have a good tasting liquid, I think could almost sell itself. I mean, it sure helps if it tastes good. But there's so much involved in it. I mean, like from the look of the label, from something that stands out in a case or on a shelf for me. Like you can have 20 different wines, and one label might just pop out at you, and you don't even know what that tastes like until you open it. So I think that's a big thing for sure. And then of course how you market that, and it's about, I think, just getting it to lips. You can have a great product and it can sit on that shelf and get dirty and dusty if you're not getting it to lips. And there's a ton of different ways of doing that. We have tasters that'll go out, or you can give away tons and tons of samples, but again, that might just sit on somebody's shelf and not get tasted. So there's definitely a lot to think about and look at when trying to market the alcohol that you're picking, for sure.
I mean, you sound like someone who's continually looking to create new things, and that's both within the business and outside the business, I'm certain. But in particular, what would be your dream liquor to create if you could make one?
That's a great question, and I think it's $100 million question, because if you knew what's been the next big thing, then you'd have it made. But it's hard to tell. I mean, you look at it over the last, say, 10 years, and Bud Light Lime came out and was like the big thing, and then pretty soon Twisted Tea came out, and it was the iced teas that took over, and now it seems to be seltzers. Everything's all seltzer right now, and there's everybody's jumping on the seltzer wagon. So what is the next best thing is like I say, the $100 million question, because if we knew that, I'd definitely be all over it, and I'd be making that product right now. But it's going to be interesting because you just never know. And what I do see is it seems to be getting less and less about beer and more about spirits and ciders and coolers and wines, which is great, because beer's always been the number one category, and it's I think almost getting overtaken with sales by by spirits now anyway. So who knows what the next big thing is, that's for sure.
I know for my wife for years drank seltzers because of the caloric benefit of having less calories per serving. But she always complained about how there was more flavor in the box that it came in than the can that she was drinking, right? And it's so funny because you are seeing this explosion in the seltzer market. Why do you think that is? Do you think it is perception, or do you think it's like reality? Is it health benefits? What do you see from your side?
Yeah, I think maybe health benefits. People are trying to live healthier. They're watching more what they eat as well as what they drink. You're seeing a lot more lower alcohol in beers and in ciders and coolers and stuff like that. So there's definitely that. And then you're finding more of the seltzer with waters and stuff like that too, becoming more and more popular. So I think it is a lifestyle change in people, and they're just keeping an eye on what they're putting in their bodies a little bit more.
Now, wine is definitely one of the most traditional alcohols that have been around for thousands of years, and there's been quite a change in the wine industry in British Columbia over the last few years as well. We're seeing a lot more individuals who are appreciating sweeter wines, rosés, lighter, fresher products, and you're seeing sparkling products as well, and you're seeing a big change towards that. What is your perception of where that's going? Because wine is a very personal, product versus some of the other ones which are more casual.
I'm personally really happy to see the BC wine industry do as well as they have been, especially seeing it where it was 20 years ago to now. It's night and day, and it seems like there's a new winery opening up monthly almost. It seems like, especially in the Okanagan. I think it's great, and especially for the amount of land that they're able to grow the grapes on, even compared to California. It's such a small comparison to that. And to see them doing as well as they are with the, for the amount of time they've been around and the amount of product they can grow, it's great to see, and it's good for the industry for sure.
You're very knowledgeable in the industry. You also clearly have passion for a variety of different things. But what do you like to do on a personal side to do your own research, or is there like a core group of people, or do you like to travel around the province and learn about products? How do you get your education?
Well, one of the best things about being in the hospitality industry is the ability to be able to travel. I've traveled around the world because of the industry I'm in. And that's been one of the most thankful things I can say about this industry. From the Dominican Republic to being at the Bruegel rum factory there, to a few Super Bowls, to from Dallas, Texas, to all over the place, just in it. Not only just going to wineries, but distilleries and breweries and what have you. And I think that's one of the most rewarding things about this. Personally, I always say that when we're training our team members for suggestions and stuff like that, when people come in and ask, I always just say, be able to suggest one thing in each category, because it's really, everybody's got their own tastes and their own preferences, and all you can really do is tell them what you like and why you like it. So if you have a suggestion for one beer that you like, and one red wine and one white wine and one cider and cooler and one spirit, then that goes a long ways. And then you can explain to that person why you like it. They might not necessarily like it, but after trying it, but as long as you can tell them one thing from each category. Personally, I like Tito's. Tito's vodka is my favorite vodka. I like, I like my lager, any lager I like personally. I'm not a big white wine drinker, but I definitely like my red wines. And one of my favorite red wines is a Camus from the Napa Valley. I like my 1942 tequila, Don Julio. So as long as you can say one thing, and it might, like I said, it might not be the best thing for that other person, but at least you can tell them something that you like and why you like it.
I want to hear more about the culture that you're discussing that you've experienced in these different countries in the liquor industries. And many of the uh, facilities, the distilleries, are family owned and operated, or they've been around for a very long period of time. Each country has its own cultural value and sensitivity. In particular, if you're talking Cuban rum or something that means a lot to a specific country.
Mhm.
How have you experienced this, and how do you bring that back to your group when you have the opportunities?
Well, the one that stands out the most is Brugal. Brugal rum in the Dominican is a huge part of the culture. It's a huge part of the Dominican. It pays a massive amount of taxes to the country. Um, they have streets named after it in all over the Dominican, actually. And just being there, it just really opens your eyes how important that distillery is to that country. It's actually funny that one day we were there, we went on a 2-day tour of Brugal, and on our last day, we had a tour guide. And that morning, we'd been given a really, really nice special bottle of Brugal. And after the second day, the tour guide was saying goodbye, and I looked at my bottle of Brugal and I gave it to him. And the guide that was with us from Brugal was freaking out on me, and I'm like, what did I do wrong? So the guy that I gave it to laughed with a big smile on his face, and the guy goes, do you realize what you've just done? And I'm like, yeah, I gave him a nice bottle of rum. And he goes, the price of that bottle of rum is what that guy usually makes in a month. So he laughed with a big smile, and the guy that gave it to me at the beginning wasn't very happy with me, but he said, so what do you have to say about that? And I'm like, can I get another one? So he ended up giving me another one. He wasn't very happy, but yeah, it's incredible what it can do for a country, and that I know that rum itself has been around for hundreds of years. So it was definitely an interesting trip for sure.
When you're talking to your staff in the stores or your management teams, and you have a bit of a responsibility in a way to help support these countries. I mean, you're making an impact in what they're able to accomplish. What do you try to say, or how do you teach them to showcase this to the guests on the other side?
A lot of companies have brand ambassadors. They'll have a brand ambassador that can represent and know a heck of a lot more about that brand than I do. So we get a ton of different brand ambassadors from different companies to come in and do in-house training. And then nowadays with technology, they can send videos, and we can do Zooms, and there's a whole bunch of different ways. We really try to instill that into our company as much as possible, and are continuing staff training because it's endless. There's so much new product coming out on a yearly basis that it's really, really hard to keep up to. You're forever, I call it, changing the scope of your real estate in your stores, because products changing so much. It's really hard to keep up to, and you can't keep the same product on the shelf all the time. So, with that 80-20 thing, if it's not selling in that top 80, we're getting rid of the bottom 20 all the time. And then spring seems to be the worst out of the whole year, although it's throughout the whole year yet that the product changes. But spring with RTDs and all the different ready to drinks, I should say, that are out, and all the different ciders and coolers and everything else that comes out, it seems to be spring that it hits. So we try to get as many of the companies that represent those products to come in and speak about them, and train our staff on them, because it's evolving all the time, and it's really hard to keep up to and keep trained as well.
In the liquor industry, it is sometimes very difficult because not only you're in a very diverse group. You have a group of people who are purchasing products for amazing events, right? Bringing a bottle of wine to their partner's parents' house the first time they meet them, wedding liquor or wedding wines, celebrations, barbecues, things that are very joyous. And the events are endless, and the way that you can express yourself through products is really, really great. But there's also a dark side to liquor, and it's very difficult in terms of substance abuse and the mental impacts that affect many people across the world due to alcohol. How do you like to approach kind of our moral responsibility as liquor um, providers and our but also balancing it with all of the good that we do for our communities and countries and things like that?
That question's a really tough question for me because I don't want to be able to. There's a lot of people that abuse alcohol, right? And we're in that industry, and it's a tough thing where I think everything's got to be, you've got to do it in your own way, right? So yeah, that's a tough question, Doug.
Yeah, I've always felt like there's such an opportunity within communities to support a community and understand our moral obligations, but at the same time, understand all of the positives that we can bring, right? Bringing jobs, bringing opportunities, bringing experiences. And I know at Northern Lights Winery, one of the focuses that we've always had coming in is making things better than when we left them, right? And so that means a lot of different things, and so for our community, we really try and give back to the community and focus on groups that can support individuals who are going through a tough time, and sometimes that means individuals with substance abuse, and then sometimes that means individuals going through like the firefighters burn fund or cancer treatments or other things. And so it's not that we can totally disclude the fact that these products can cause harm, but also trying to impact them in a positive way, market them in a positive way, and ensure that that we're using them appropriately. Now, on the positive side, I just love working with a customer to find a product that is going to serve them the best. And when I'm talking to my staff, I often spend a lot of time talking about finding the right product for the right person. You kind of touched on this a little bit, that it's very difficult because everyone has a specific taste or a unique, palate of what they want. Some people like tequilas, some people don't like tequilas, right? Some people like sweet fruit wines, some people like dry, complex, bold grape wines, and it's always a balance in terms of finding the right product for the right person. How do you approach it, and how do you train your staff so that everyone gets something that they're going to value when they open the bottle?
Yeah, again, it's about just having suggestions, but finding out what exactly that customer is doing for an event. I know weddings are a tough one because you're trying to, appease a whole bunch of different people in one event. So, what do you pick for the beer? What do you pick for the spirits? And how much do you pick? One of the biggest things with technology nowadays is you can actually go online and get wedding calculators, and so you plug in, how many people, what you think they're going to be drinking as far as in what category, and it'll break down on pretty much to the ounce or to the bottle of what you should be bringing. Now, whether or not how accurate that is another thing, because you don't know exactly, but it is very close, and it kind of gives you a guideline, which is important. Same with the type of alcohol and what what you think they'll want. I think it's just finding out a little bit more about the group and how big that group is, what their likes are. They can tell you, whether they like red more than white, or a hoppy beer rather than just a lager or a Hefeweizen or whatever. But it's really just about trying to find out as much as you can and then giving them some suggestions and going from there. Because it's going to be really hard to nail it, because I don't think of any event where they've come back and said, that was terrible, because you can only do your best. That's the way I look at it.
Yeah. Weddings I always call like the Super Bowl for wines because there's so much emotion attached to that event. And whether you are the person getting married or you are attending as a guest of those individuals, when you have a product there, it always tastes that much better. People aren't going to focus on the tasting notes. They're not going to say, this, I wish that this had a little more hop in it or something to that degree. They're really focusing on how it makes them feel in the moment with connecting to, the people who they love. And so for our products, I just always love to see them at weddings because it is just so impactful for our brand. And when you leave a wedding and then you see that bottle a couple of days, weeks, months, years later, then you can connect it back and you can say, oh, do you remember when we were at Kim's wedding and Kim had this bottle there and I'd never tried it before, and now this is like all I drink, or I drink this on a frequent basis, and every time I do, I think of Kim and John or whoever it was that was getting married.
Yeah, it's like listening to a song that can bring you back to that time for sure.
So when you're creating these experiences yourself as well, I want to kind of move over to Chances and Chances. Casinos had obviously a really difficult time through the pandemic, and now we're starting to come out of it. And you do a lot in the experiences industry. What do you focus on, and why do you enjoy that portion of the business so much?
I enjoy it just because it's different than the everyday liquor store, or it's just a different industry altogether. Chances and I think just gaming in BC has struggled over the last 2 to 3 years, especially because of the pandemic and being closed completely for 2 years. We're just getting back to, we're coming up to our first year. July 1st is our first full year of reopening. And even that first year has been a major struggle, not only with the restrictions that were still in place that have just been lifted recently, but to staffing and sickness and mental illness and a whole bunch of different things that we've never really had to deal with in a business until now. So we're learning, and we're learning how to deal with it on a day-to-day basis. And I don't think it's going to be over anytime soon. I think it's going to be something that we have to deal with for years to come, especially the mental illness part of it. I think that's something that's going to be ongoing, because it's been a strain on our team. And we're not the only group as well that have been struggling with staffing just in general. So I know this has probably been the hardest. Last 6 months has been the hardest that I've dealt with in the hospitality industry, in just dealing with hiring people in general. It's been a very, very tough go. And if anything, I've been talking to other people in the industry, and obviously it's not just us, it's everywhere. So thank God for that, because I'm starting to feel it was just us, but it's not. And so what we're learning with that is just to really be more diverse, and not do things like the way we used to, is try to do things differently. So we're looking at hiring foreign workers. We're looking at hiring people that are handicapped, that you might not have looked at that same way before, as far as knowing there's a huge pool in that category that we've never really looked at before. And now we are, and they're a great pool of people to hire. And different agencies that we've never looked at before, we're looking at now to help us onboard people. So it's definitely been a struggle, but like I said, things are starting to open up again, and we're not normal yet, but we're getting towards there.
You strike me as someone who cares for your people very deeply, and that probably was ingrained with you from a very early time. In particular, your group has some pretty core values. Could you talk about those and how you share them with your team?
Yeah, well, our mission statement is, with a sense of fun, we passionately serve an entertaining experience that makes you feel special. And it's something that we try to instilled to each one of our team members. I think it's important that we do try to come across as something, whether you walk into one of our liquor stores or you walk into a casino, that you're having a good experience, and we're making it that way as best as possible. As far as our core values go, we look at strong systems within our company. We look at being a role model. I think being a role model is leading by example, and having a positive influence, I think, is very important. Another one of our core values is just having fun and smile. I mean, that's an important thing, and sometimes you forget to do that in any industry, that's for sure. We believe in bleeding edge, and by bleeding edge, we believe that try things that haven't been done before, or create things that haven't been done before. So that's why you see on our retail side that we're coming up with different products all the time and stuff, because that's in our core values. And then living and using our 5 I's. So our 5 I's is it right for the guest? Is it right for the company? Is it ethical? Is it something for which you are willing to be accountable for? And is it consistent with company beliefs? So those are our main core values, and we instill those into our managers and into our team members, and go from there.
Amazing. So you also have a really cool business on top of the ones we've spoke about today, which is the Sasquatch Mountain Resort. Amazing fun. You grew up skiing. You clearly love that industry as well. Tell us about some of the exciting things you have coming up there at the same time.
Yeah, Sasquatch Mountain Resort, we've now been involved in for over 12 years. It used to be called Hemlock Mountain Resort, and we rebranded it about 5 years ago, I believe, to Sasquatch Mountain Resort. And we have a fantastic team up there, and things are looking good. And talking about the pandemic and everything else, well, the pandemic was one thing that helped the ski industry of all things, because there wasn't a heck of a lot of other things to do, and you were outside, and we were able to continue that business and do very well with it. We added, about 2 years ago, we added a new high-speed quad up at Sasquatch Mountain Resort, and we're hoping to add another one in the next couple of years. As well as this year, we're going to open up a new terrain park, which is great for the families. They can tie into this terrain park and spend hours and do different things on it. There's a 3-story free fall at the end of it, which is kind of fun, but you're all roped in and tied up. Also, in the next 1 to 2 years, we're hoping to put a new mountain coaster up there, as well as another new high-speed quad on the other side of it. So a lot of really cool things in the short term. As far as the long term for Sasquatch Mountain Resort, in the next 5 to 10 years, we hope to build a new hotel, an ice rink, a hostel, some retail space, some F&B, some more F&B locations, and more chairs as we go along. So lots of excitement and lots of plans coming up for Sasquatch Mountain, for sure.
The Berezan Group seems to have a ton of stuff on the horizon and a lot of fun. Before we exit, what can you tell us about the Berezan Group? I know it is a really tight-knit family group that's been around for a long time. Clearly, you identify with this, or you wouldn't still be here. Maybe give us a bit of the history of it.
I think that's what got me years ago with the Berezan Group, was just, it is that family feel. You don't feel like a number. You don't feel like you work for this big corporate conglomerate group. It really does still have that family feel to it. Even though we are growing, we still try to keep that feel. I think one of the biggest things that I can remember when I first started with the company was the first Christmas party I went to. Ralph and Lorraine were at the front door shaking hands and greeting each employee as they walked into the Christmas party, giving them a personal Christmas card to each and every one of their employees. And I went, wow, you don't see that a lot in companies nowadays. And it's held true since then. It really still does feel like a family company, and still is, and that's why I'm still around, for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Troy. It's been a real pleasure talking to you today. You have so much value, and you've added a lot of opportunity for people across the province of BC. I can't wait to see what the Berezan Group does, both with your resort, but all around over the next few years. I'm definitely convinced you're going to be very successful. I'm also going to be looking for a bunch of your products because I know that they've got your fingerprint right all over it. If anyone wants to touch base with you in the future, what social media platforms can they find you or the Berezan Group?
I'm on LinkedIn. I can get Troy B at berezanhg.com is a great way of getting a hold of me as well.
Awesome. And we'll throw those in the show links as well. But for now, thank you so much, Troy. It has been a real pleasure. I can't wait to get to know you more in the future. And this has been another episode of You Sip, I Sip. Thank you so much for listening, and can't wait to see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to You Sip, I Sip. Please hit the 5-star rating and leave us a review. If you'd like to learn more about Northern Lights Winery, text us at 604-670-4046 or visit us on social media at Northern Lights Winery.